going to start with an analogy of a town, and a town is an ecosystem built around community, right? With an administration and suppliers and shops and cafes and restaurants and all of it. And that ecosystem depends upon people cooperating. It depends upon the baker supplying the cafe and all the rest of it. And the question is, if you cooperate and work together, can you create more value? And particularly in the wine industry, I think it's pretty clear that there is a need to communicate. There is a desire to sell wine between each other as well as to your addressable markets. And the better that you communicate and cooperate, the more you're likely to sell. Typically, an ecosystem ends up with an administrator, somebody who is effectively facilitating all of the other connections that take place. And by the way, an ecosystem also requires banking. It requires access to funds in order to ensure that there's money for working capital and that kind of stuff. An ecosystem pulls together all of these sort of different things.
And we think that people and relationships are really what make this industry go round, at least in our part of the market. And so that the ecosystem for us and the way that we're in the center of it is probably ensuring that we're connecting the right supply and demand and with the right team to be able to do those things.
You've got to consider, are you creating value through all of that? Is it better to collaborate and cooperate than trying to do it all on your own? Are you going to be more successful? Are you going to ultimately deliver a better experience to your customers? Adaptability, I think, is really important, meaning all of those sales channels and connections and industry infrastructures that you really need around you need to feel like they're designed for you and that they're modular, that you can pick and choose which ones you're going to use to support your business model. And if you do that right, then you sort of serve what I call the kind of the Rubik's Cube challenge of an ecosystem, which is whoever you are within the ecosystem, you need to feel that you're at the center of it. Because if you're at the center, if you perceive to be at the center of that ecosystem because there are sufficient services and integrations and channels both on the supply side and the sales side for you, then that's the litmus test of whether it's working.
There are huge amounts of benefits with collaboration. And the great thing about today is we now have the digital tools to make it much easier for us to connect in the ways that are useful to us, to not bother with the ones that aren't. I think we all are becoming more and more aware of the lack of velocity in trading, and so the more that we can get the stock to turn through the system, the more we can do that with the least amount of frictional cost. Because as I mentioned earlier, I think transparency is a constraint which we're going to have to live with, and so we better take account of it. And we need to make sure that when whatever transaction we're doing or however we're operating, that we're not deploying precious capital in areas which we are not benefiting from and our customers are not benefiting from. So an ecosystem like, for example, the hub facilitates an awful lot more productivity than one could have done in the kind of office I remember from the early 70s.
We're in a long tail market, right? We're in a classic SME market, and as Simon says, if you're in a market like that, it doesn't hurt to gather around other people that are like you. The cost of trying to shape business processes and workflows to the way that you work currently today, as opposed to the rather more cost-effective way of doing it, which is to establish best practice collectively as an industry, which is effectively what the industry is doing with Wine Hub, and then to be able to leverage that shared input in being able to work to a set of common standards and common workflows that are going to make you more efficient and going to reduce friction.
We think less about competition and much more about collaboration and this idea of an ecosystem being absolutely integral to our strategic and kind of competitive sources of competitive advantage. So I do think that any opportunities for technology to do what computers do best, to free up our humans to do what people do best, are very important. So we are very tech pro in terms of ERP and website and those types of investment, but we're also very human and relationships pro as well.
It has to create value, and all of that stuff happening behind the scenes and within the trade ultimately needs to find an expression with the touch point between your business and a customer. It needs to make it easier for you to engage with your addressable market wherever it is. They're not necessarily always going to come to you, and it needs to make it easier for you to buy well so that you can improve your margins.